Everybody, to welcome into technical difficulties. You'll have to bear with me here. I would absolutely love to welcome into the show. Again, we are here to celebrate the life of Otis Taylor, a former Prairie View A&M All-American national champion, along with his teammate, as you see at the bottom here, Mr. Ken Houston, Super Bowl champion with the Kansas City Chiefs, along with his teammate up on the right side of your screen. This Mr. Noland, Super Gnat Smith. I'd like to welcome both of you gentlemen into the show. Thank you so much for joining us tonight.
Thank you. Good to be here.
Good. Obviously, just obviously having lost Mr. Taylor today, I know that I've talked to both of you, and it's a tough day for, I think, for a lot of folks. As far as I got into the campaign about a year ago now, is when I started this campaign to try to help him get into the Hall of Fame. And I've gotten an interview with Mr. Houston. In fact, we spent a couple of days together, Mr. Houston, didn't we? I messed up the first one, so we had to do it again. So we got to spend some time together. But I got to tell you that I've learned so much about him and about his career that it's just, this touched me in a way that I didn't realize that it could. You know, I've been a sports writer for a long time, content creator for a long time, and I don't get too wound up about athletes very often, but Otis Taylor was something special. So if, just starting with Mr. Smith, I know you were a teammate with him when he was at his best there in Kansas City. And just what was it like to be on the field with him and to see some of the things that you saw him do on the football field?
Well, Otis was an amazing guy, very talented. And, being a teammate of his, we saw Otis do things even in practice that you just couldn't imagine. I know a lot of fans get to see Otis the day of the football game, but when you with this guy 7 days a week, other than the day that you have off in football, I mean, he was just a pleasure to be around. You knew when Lynn dropped back to throw a pass, if he put it Otis' way, Otis
he was going to go get it.
Just, he was a fantastic receiver. And I'm a lot like you. I've been writing letters and stuff, trying to get Otis in the Hall of Fame. And I still believe today, I always will, the Hall of Fame would not be complete until Otis Taylor go into the Hall of Fame.
I would agree with that. And I gotta say, I wasn't born until a year after he stopped playing. So I didn't know who he was growing up. I grew up as a Jerry Rice fan. I mean, being a 49er fan. And when I got approached about this, about the campaign, it was something that we went back and started looking at his film, and I had some of my other friends and stuff that looking at it, and we're just like, who in the world is this guy? I mean, he just did things that it seemed like he was kind of ahead of his time. And the more that you see from people, and then having talked to you, Mr. Houston, I think one of the things that struck me the most, and that's where I wanted to kind of head to it with you, is you were the first person, but definitely not the last person that I talked to, that when I asked you to compare him to somebody, you weren't comparing him to players from today or players from any time, except for you said to me he was Jim Brown or Muhammad Ali. And then I've later heard him say, people say he was Wilt Chamberlain or like today's LeBron. He just kind of transcended sports altogether. Isn't that correct?
That's right. First of all, I'd like to give my condolences to the family. And
Yes.
I've been thinking about this all day. It's kind of surreal. And I think about how all football players are great. Every one of them. They've done something
Absolutely.
special to be on the field, and they deserve any accolade they can get. But Otis was special. You know, I played in my mind almost all day long. He was special. I played with him in college. He was doing the same thing in college. Then had to play against him when he got to Kansas City, and then watched him play. And I still talk to Emmett Thomas, and those guys. And you know, there have been a lot of great players, including Supernet. Okay, and that's why you kind of hesitate to talk about one football player because all of them have their greatness. But I think we can agree on one thing. Not only was Otis great, Otis was special. And the way you know they're special, they make other football players watch. When I was off the field, I was outfield and he's on there. But when I got a chance to watch the Kansas City play, I watched Otis Taylor, and he was doing the same thing in college. He did the same thing in high school. I mean, we watched him at Prairie. So you know, I sometimes I almost feel guilty about being in the Hall of Fame because there are so many other guys that are left out. You know, and it's just it's an unfortunate situation. He is in the Hall of Fame because the small black college Hall of Fame
Absolutely.
they have a room in Canton, and Otis is in that room. So you know, like
Okay.
I would love one day to see him be where all other football players are in it. You know, name me one player who wasn't great in his own right. I got to say that
Oh,
first. And then you get
yeah.
guys who stood out in their greatness where they were noticed by, to me, other football players. And Otis was one that was noticed by everyone. And I still say the same thing. And I'm like Noland. You know, like I watched the game today, and I don't jump nobody in front of Otis. He was that good.
You know, and it's funny that you say that. And thank you for Hawaiian Ice for saying this. You said that he was one of the greats and will never be forgotten as long as we have videos, pictures, and we have him in our memories. There will never be anyone like him. He is a true great. And you are absolutely correct in that. Hank, thank you for coming in as well. He definitely needs to be in the Hall of Fame. I think that that's one of the things that, and another thing that you had told me and Kerwin when we spoke that kind of sticks with me, and I think about it all the time, is that you said, you know, we're still talking about this man. He hadn't played football in 50 years, and we're still talking about him like he's running up and down the field today. And they only do that with the all-time greats. And so that was something that kind of really stuck with me. And I just that in the Muhammad Ali, you know, you were just talking about how you could tell there was a difference in those guys, and it was just I tell you, it's just one of those. It's a tough deal for us to sit back and think, because I know looking at it, and as I said, even having friends and stuff like that, and I couldn't tell you that I think that. I mean, I believe that Jerry Rice did everything I mean, he earned his status as the GOAT, if they, or the greatest, right? But I think that if you switched places with him, I don't imagine that Otis would have done anything differently. It just he's body. He was that first. I remember talking to my father-in-law, and he had said one day, I said, "Do you remember Otis Taylor?" And he goes, "Do I remember him?" He goes, "That guy was like the first prototype receiver." He goes, "And I don't think I ever saw him go out of bounds either." He goes, "I love that guy." He goes, "How's he doing?" And I was like, "Well, he's still not in the Hall of Fame." And he goes, "I thought he was in the Hall of Fame years ago, And so it was something that just kind of sticks with me, because anytime I would talk to anybody about it, people all remembered him, and they all thought of him as just unbelievable. And digging and I mean, being a sports writer, and I love digging in stats and looking at old game film and doing stuff. I mean, I remember little things about sports. It's kind of weird. It doesn't really help me in any other part of my life, but I can remember sports stuff. And so that's probably why I do what I do. But that being said, I know that having spoke with you guys, I love hearing this stuff of like, can you give us a story, Noland, of something that you remember from a game or something like that just sticks out to you?
Well, first of all, let me say this, and let's get back to the Hall of Fame, for instance.
Sure.
Name any player. Can anybody name a player that was more instrumental in the NFL merger with the AFL than Otis Taylor? And going back to my days in Kansas City, and we, to my knowledge, was the first team where blacks outnumbered the whites on the active roster. And 40 years later, I would run into people and they could name all 24 starters, offense and defense, on our team. That's something hard to do after a couple of years now in the NFL. And I think that was one of the things that made most AFL and NFL teams so great, was that you didn't have a lot of trading. Most of the guys played their career with one specific team. You could just name them. But as far as a guy like Otis, you also have to understand that teams back then, we passed, but we also had a combination of running. And so we had a good mix. Now, some teams might throw 60 passes a game, where back in the day, we might play 25 or 30 per game because we had such a mixture. But when you called on Otis Taylor and those type receivers to catch a pass, throw a pass to him, it was very exciting. Guys like Lance Allworth, you can name all those guys, but when it came to passing, the AFL is really, I think that the NFL had no choice but to merge with the AFL, because from a black audience, we had a great following, and most of the NFL, the American Football League players at that particular time played a big part in the owners having to realize the AFL they had to reckon with, and so they end up merging.
It was something that I was going to ask you about too, because I noticed that when I started going through some of it, we were looking at, a lot of you guys as teammates there, both in Houston and in Kansas City. It seemed like they would be drafted in a higher round or something in the NFL. For instance, like Bobby Bell, he was drafted in, like, I think the 8th or 9th or 10th round or something like that. It was way late. But he had been drafted by Minnesota, which is where he had went to college, was in Minnesota. So he thought he was going across town. He ended up taking, the deal from Kansas City. And then you have the same thing with Garrett from USC, had won the Heisman Trophy right there in California, and the Rams picked him in the 2nd round. And so the Chiefs didn't pick him until like the 20th round, and he went. And I mean, it's nice and sunny and nice and warm out there in LA. And he went to bone chill in Kansas City. So there was obviously, I know, tell me a little bit about Lloyd Wells. Was he one of the folks, the guys that scouted you and got you to Kansas City or brought you along?
Well, But really, tell you the truth, Lloyd Wells was very instrumental, and include myself.
Yes, sir.
When I was drafted, I would say within maybe 6 or 7 hours, he was in Kansas City trying to get me signed to a contract. And he scouted, matter of fact, he scouted all the HBCU schools looking for talent and found an awful lot of it.
Right. And that was something that, we kept hearing that nobody else was even trying to scout at the HBCUs. And at that point, no, it's like, I think you were telling us, Mr. Houston, that you weren't going to be playing at Texas or Texas A&M or somewhere like that, and unless you were going to go way, way, way away from home, the HBCUs was the place to go, but the NFL wasn't scouting there. So did you feel like that was the AFL were going to be the guys that you want? I mean, did you feel more comfortable there? What was it that made so many of you guys sign with your AFL teams rather than NFL? Because very few did that.
Well, if I can chime in just a little bit.
Please.
That's on somebody we had to sign with, the AFL.
Right.
I was in college. The talent was so thick at the small black colleges until I remember at Prairie, I was an offensive center and played offensive center for 4 years. Couldn't start. And then ended up being a linebacker and then got drafted as a safety. And I look on that team, we all looked up to Otis. But I looked on that team and we probably had 15 or 20 guys that went to pro. I know Jackson State, Verlin Biggs and that crew. And let me say this, I was thinking, I was surprised to see Nolan Smith when I got on the video tonight. But the first thing hopped in my mind was Super Gnat. And he was great. He was great. And I mean,
I've seen some amazing film of Mr. Smith.
Is that Nolan Smith? And these names I have forgotten it, but there's so many good or great players that played in the small black. They named them small black colleges. That's what they said. But that's all we had. We went to college, okay? And it, I don't accept every name that somebody hang on me. If it's a bus, I got on the bus. If it's a train, I got on the train. So I've learned to speak of everything in its first tense so I could live with myself, and that's why that the guys know. You can ask guys. Just go ask any. You don't have to ask any one guy in particular, but just go ask any guy. Man, hey, who belongs in the Hall of Fame? And those guys will tell you. It may be somebody you never thought of, but they'll tell you because they had. I'm like, I heard you say it. I had forgotten it. We only threw the ball on third down. Everybody knew you were going to catch a pass, and we could put. You had a guy like Otis. They had other talent also. But you had a guy like Otis, we put 2 or 3 men on him because we knew who he was going to throw to, and we still couldn't stop him. And I'm saying Otis Taylor, but I could also say Nolan Smith, okay? And so that's just the way it was back then, and we accepted that. And that's why those names, if you could ever pull up a book of names, they'd go down forever, Sorry I cut in on you. I just want to say that.
That question was for you, so that's okay. No, you didn't cut in. Thank you so much for that. And honestly, it's funny because again, I'd rather just have you guys talk more than anything here. So I'll ask a couple questions and let y'all go. But being a defensive back and having to deal with him, I mean, when I was in Houston, right before they had cut down to the finalists, I talked to Zeke Moore, who was one of your teammates as well, right?
Zeke Moore?
And he was, yes, sir.
Yeah.
And he kept saying we were talking about him. He said, man, that guy would knock you out. if you didn't pay attention to where you were on the field, and you had told me that same thing, and he said he would knock you out. And I remember Ralph Cooper telling me a story about that him and Zeke would get out on the field before the games and be like, "We're going to fight or play today." And so, it was a different game back then, but he was definitely a different game, obviously. But and you think about that is all these, when you start parsing numbers and things like that, and I hate doing that because it's just silly. The game's different. The game, Mr. Smith, you talked about that you guys ran a lot, but you passed certain times you would throw more. But the thing is that I remember game in, I think it was 66 or 67. I'm going through all of these games. And out of 65 plays, I think 61 of them were run plays. So, and then of course I remember who was it that was saying that? It was one of your teammates, the safety that just got into the Hall of Fame a couple of years ago. Gosh, why am I forgetting his name?
Thomas? Johnny Robinson?
Johnny Robinson. Yeah, he always said that, man, he goes, I can't imagine what it would have been like if they had to only hit him for 5 yards, because they were draped all over him. That 5-yard rule would have just been crazy. So, I mean, as a safety, what would that, because you said you better hit his big butt on the line, otherwise you're dead. I remember you saying that.
The ball should be off in 1,003. Okay, you see that right now on TV. They're trying to get down to 2 and 1, so the ball needs to be released. If they were fighting us on the line of scrimmage 4 and 5, what do you think it did to their routes? And it would be the same thing now. So if they change the rules, then the rules changes the game. And so hopefully you'll have enough older guys left to say, you know what, he caught that and I respect him for everything he did. But this is what we did different. Back then you had to watch your face to get off the line of scrimmage because those guys were designed to hurt you. And he knows that, And so, but anyway, this is about Otis. And again, my condolences to the family. And this one guy to me will always be deserving.
Yeah. So you were talking about how you felt like he should definitely be in the Hall of Fame, Mr. Smith. But do you have a certain game that stands out in your head, or a play that he made, or, I mean, were you there whenever he in the Raider game when he hit the big guy that cheap shotted Lynn Dawson? Were you in there?
But I had just left. I think that was Ben Davidson.
Ben Davidson, yes, yes.
Really, tell you the truth, it was a lot. It was a lot of those situations. I can tell you that. Yeah. And that was the thing about our team is that we was very protective toward each other. We did not allow other teams to come in and take cheap shots. That was a no-no. And one thing about me, with me being the smallest player in the league at that particular time, I got a lot of protection. Trust me. And they always had my back. And so, I mean, it was like they was my big brothers, and they really looked out for me. That was from Otis all the way down, and that's what we did for everybody. And a lot of people doesn't realize. Here again, we're really talking about Otis, but we're talking about the trend set that the AFL did. Is the fact, just take for instance myself, a lot of people don't realize, but I was the first player drafted solely as a punt and kick return specialist in the NFL. But at that time, it was the AFL. And they didn't even recognize specialists as far as, even though I led the league in punt returns, I didn't get a chance to go to the Pro Bowl simply because at that particular juncture, it was new. And then other teams start realizing that the kicking game was so instrumental in a football game. So, but from Emmett Thomas, Willie Lanier, all those guys, they blocked for me like there was no tomorrow, and as well as Otis. So we all joined together, and that's what made our team so united.
Well, and even like Jim Kearney being the quarterback there at Prairie View, you know, and then he went and became a safety in the NFL, you know, and like it's amazes me that, you know, the things that he did in college, you know, as a quarterback, you know, and he didn't ever get that opportunity, obviously, in the league. But I tell you, it was something that it's again, I used to tell Kerwin, and he's asking a question here, and I kind of wanted to get to that to you guys. Do you guys feel like that there should be a change in this Hall of Fame voting because I think that's something that we've come to, having done that, and we got Otis was further along in the voting than he ever got before last year, apparently. So he didn't make it to the finals, but he was close. I feel like there may be still another couple of steps that need to be took, but I do feel like he's definitely deserving to go in. But the problem is that you have a lot of guys that they're newer voters. You know, they didn't see the game. It almost similar to like with me. You know, until I got involved in this. I mean, I watched the era that I grew up in, so just like everybody else, I would imagine. But I'm so glad that I've gotten into it because I've found so many amazing players. You know, I haven't watched your film, Mr. Houston, and then the Super Gnat. I mean, that was fun watching. And another guy that I really, really would love to see get into the Hall of Fame, and we talked about this before, Mr. Houston, was Lamar Parrish, who just, I mean, that guy, talk about a kick returner and a punt returner, that guy could let it in. And I think Terry Bradshaw didn't ever want to see him again. He was always picking him off. So, you know, there's a lot of these folks that played back in your era that I'm just like, wow. But I guess still the question I have, and Kerwin was asking it, was, should it change to where you go to more players? I mean, I even heard a more modern player, Brian Urlacher, that I grew up with around here. He said that, you know, he felt like that players should be picking the Hall of Famers, because you guys know, you know who the best guys were out there. You know, what are your thoughts on that?
No.
No.
Nola.
Well, you're talking to me.
Yeah.
Oh,
Either one of you guys, just jump in.
Oh, definitely. I definitely think there's something wrong with the voting situation, simply because seem like most of the people that's voted in, we have some guys that's going into the Hall awful quick, and I'm not taking anything away from them, but when you look the publicity and a lot of things that the modern guys are, have been able to take advantage of today, I definitely feel that situation needs to be taken a look at, and we have quite a few guys that I feel deserve to be in the Hall of Fame, and I don't know what we can do about it, but we definitely have to keep fighting for guys like Otis, and there's other guys that, same way.
Part of the problem, I think, is, and I think this is something that you said to me, Mr. Houston, but let me get your opinion on that as well. Is that, do you feel like maybe the players should take more of that responsibility of putting those guys in, or your vote should count a little more? Because I know that you were a part of the process at one point. We talked about that in the past, and they do have some players there, but don't you feel like maybe there should be a senior committee that, I mean, look, man, I don't understand how guys the game was so different when it started, right? I mean, it was almost rugby, and they didn't put a Hall of Fame until 40, 50 years after the game had started. So, I mean, I wouldn't know anything about those guys in the 20s, and neither probably would you guys, you know?
Well,
but
they used to only take 5.
Right.
Okay. And I think they've tried to improve on that by raising the numbers to get guys in the last couple of years. But it's not easy for me to say because when you meet Night Train Lane, those guys, it was brutal for them to get in the hall. I mean, the
Sure,
things
sure.
they had to put up with was just brutal. So
Yeah.
I hesitate because it's like I'm talking to Noland, and then I see Billy White shoes, and then I see,
Yeah.
all the guys lined up that really has a legitimate chance in the kick return and stuff like that. And so then you see the receivers, and then you see that they asked me the question this year about defensive backs. What about defensive backs? And I said, it's hard for me to say because there are some defensive backs. In my mind, I go back to Night Train Lane. He was actually in the hall, and I got a chance to talk to him and listen to what all he had to go through. And it made my way better. And I'm sure that they're working to make the ways better. But what happened, you just have so many numbers. So what do you do, when you have those numbers? And like I said, I've been there a couple of times, and I honestly think it's almost like when they pick a Pro Bowl. When I played in the game, the only somebody I could pick was a tight end. So I couldn't pick a tackle, nobody like that. I had to pick a tight end that I played against, because I knew tight end. So now they have the public picking. You play a Pro Bowl game now, if you got 50,000 people voting, that guy's going to be a Pro Bowler whether he's born or not.
Yeah.
And so it's just
definitely different.
It's a process, and they're trying hard. I can say that. I know that's what.
And I agree with you there, but that's where we were kind of talking about it, was that I feel like even with so for the seniors that last year and this year and next year for sure, but they were talking about doing it for a little longer, that they were, instead of having one senior, up to 3 get in. So you had, you got your 3 in this year. But a lot of the guys that are seniors now, I mean, and I'm starting to look at that, a lot of the guys that are seniors now, you're looking at guys like, well, Sterling Sharp is in that group. Roger Craig's in that group. These are guys that whenever I was growing up, I was watching them, and so, and they just played a different game. Because I look at Otis's biggest year, and it was 1,197 yards, and he did it on 57 catches. In his MVP year, which he's the only receiver aside from Jerry Rice to ever be named MVP by any publication. Now, that he wasn't the official MVP, because the AP voters, they had given that, he didn't get that one, but he was second in the AP, which is Jerry Rice is also the only receiver to do that. But he was voted MVP in the year they won the Super Bowl, or the year after they'd won the Super Bowl. And they probably would have got to the Super Bowl had it not been for a crazy weather situation where it was just not cold on Christmas, in that game against the Dolphins, the longest game of all time at that point. But I feel like what happened was, here's what happens is it took so long before they even started a Hall of Fame. And you've got this backlog, and these 3 people at a time, it's never going to really cut into that. And you're always going to remember the closest guy to you. I can tell you everything I remember everything about Sterling Sharp. I remember everything about Roger Craig. I think he should have been in the Hall of Fame already. I think Roger Craig, being the first guy to get 1,000 receiving yards and 1,000 rushing yards, Marshall Faulk got in for it. Why hasn't Roger? But now that he's a senior, do I feel like he deserves it more than some of these guys that have been there all this time? No. And why are we comparing, just like Kerwin's saying right here, why are we comparing him to Jerry Rice? And look who we're comparing him to. We feel like that he could have done that, but had he been able to, did they throw the ball like that? No. we did a stat thing together that Kerwin and I kind of put it together of like just kind of basically where you swap out the number of passes and completions for a time period. And if you were to swap him out for just a 10-year period with anybody in football, Otis Taylor would have, if you gave him the same amount of catches, like I said, 1197 on 57 catches. I mean, I think the lowest amount of catches that ever got over, once you get up into the modern day, I think about, for instance, Michael Irvin that year in 95, where Jerry Rice had the all-time record at that point that year from that year. But Michael Irvin had, I think, 1,600 something yards and was still behind Jerry, but he had 110 catches. To think about that, 57 catches and he gets almost 1,300 yards. It was 1,197, so 1,200 or 1,297. It was 1,300 yards basically. 300 yards behind and 60 catches behind. That just tells you the difference in the game. And again, they didn't have an illegal contact rule when he played. That didn't come into effect until after he was gone. So it's just, to me, I just feel like the problem is not because those guys are never going to see that. I don't see how any of these modern sports writers are ever going to see what they need to see. I mean, so why not take it out? The senior voting should be, to me, and this is something we've talked about, I feel like the senior voting should be left to you guys that played, because you can tell them who was the best, and I talked to Woody Campbell when I was down there, and I've talked to Zeke. I've not talked to a single player that played professional football since I started on all of this that didn't say you're out of your mind if you don't think he's a Hall of Famer. And again, I go back to what you said, Mr. Houston. You just kept saying we wouldn't be talking. I mean, we're talking about him right now like he's still running up and down the field. And you only do that with the all-time greats. If you can say that and you're a top 100 all-time player, how is it that a sports writer can overrule that? I think it's ridiculous. And I am a sports writer. Go ahead. Mr. Houston?
No, yeah, I hear you. And as you were talking, I thought about baseball.
Mm-hmm.
and in their Hall of Fame. I mean, they may not take anybody. Okay? And so I don't know how you fix that. I don't know how you fix it. I know that the NFL is trying to when they added all the guys last year and year before and stuff like that, so at least somebody has recognized that a lot more guys deserve to be in there. But it's like, what do you do, poll the player? I'm sitting up here looking at Noland, and I'm wondering, well, who would he pick? And so it's that's a very that's a question right now that has no answer. Yeah, I just don't see it. I don't see it happening unless you can take 100 a year, and I don't see that happening. I don't know. I mean, that's something.
Nolan, what do you think about that? What do you feel about that, Mr. Smith?
Well, as Ken mentioned earlier, for a long time, the NFL only brought a few guys into the Hall of Fame.
Yeah.
And so with that, they was, a lot of good players, the older players was falling further and further behind. And now you have this modern passing. Look what happened to the running backs in the past 7 or 8 years.
That's right.
You got a couple of guys that stand out, but the running back is not the featured guy anymore. And where did all this come from? It came from the old AFL. And that's when the NFL realized that they had to change. So they really need to take a closer look at the older players, and I'm talking about the real seniors, and give those guys the honor that they should have. And it's too many right now left out, such as guys like Otis Taylor, to name quite a few more. And what we do about it, I'm not quite sure, but I would love to see that list expanded as far as the senior players.
And do you feel like that's something? And see, I think you get kind of stuck between. You've got one side of people that says it's not exclusive enough. I mean, I've heard Coach Prime say that, right? And then I've heard guys say, and especially for the thing is I feel like there should be more in from you guys' generation because of the fact that modern football came from what you guys did. You know, you merged the leagues. I mean, you changed the game and made it household. You know, I mean, most of the NFL teams, like you said, they were all over on the East Coast. They weren't doing a lot of stuff like that on the West Coast. And then in particular, I mean, you just didn't have well, I mean, Lamar Hunt was trying to buy an NFL team for years before he was able to buy the Chiefs, you know, but he couldn't. They kept turning him down, you know. And I always felt like it was funny that they would always, you know, you have this inferiority narrative about, you know, that the AFL was inferior to the NFL when, I mean, I know the Packers won the first two. I get it. But how many championships had they won in the NFL coming into the merger time, right? I mean, a bunch, right? They were kicking everybody's butt at that point. But then when you look at it, they won those first two, but then the AFL teams won 4 of the next 6, you know? And then they dominated the 70s. So this inferiority thing, I mean, all you have to do is like look at it a little bit. And then you see that it's all trash, that it's just a bunch of trash. And I'd love to change Coach Prime's. But I think that Coach Prime really, Kerwin, the more we talk about that, I know when he said things like that, I think he's more talking about the guys that played in his generation, that some of those dudes or after him, that they just didn't have it. But I just feel like that there's a lot of those things that a lot of people look at. Johnny Robinson, it took him so long to get in as well. Ken Riley's getting in this year, and he probably should have been in years ago. Lamar Parrish has never been really up for the vote. You know, I don't even think they've ever discussed him. From what I've heard, they've never discussed him in the room, you know. And to me, the guy had, I mean, Mr. Houston, he had more interceptions than you did, you know. And I mean, obviously you played safety. He's a corner. And plus with his kick returning and stuff like that, and he's never even been discussed. He had 9 Pro Bowls, you know, back when you had to, you know, Lamar. Yeah. And I mean, and they don't even discuss him. And it's just, it makes me crazy that, you know, and literally, you know, Kerwin mentioned it a little while ago here in the chat. He was saying that Otis Taylor scored the last touchdown in the AFL, the last AFL touchdown. That was his touchdown to win the Super Bowl against Minnesota. And so that was, you know, he had his amazing run up to it. I know Lance Allworth was amazing too. Lance got in. But I do remember a book, and I don't have the book, Kerwin does, but it had the greatest pass catchers in the NFL, and it was made in 1972, and Otis was on the cover, and he was the first guy they talked about before Lance Allworth. And I remember reading in that what did he say? One of the guys was saying generally they would, you might agree to disagree on them, but you're only talking about those two guys if you're talking about the best receivers. And that's what Woody said. He goes, you only talk about those dudes. You don't have to go any further. And they're not even bad mouthing anybody else. But did you have anybody that was harder to cover for you, Mr. Houston?
Say it again.
Was there anybody harder to cover and to try to hold down than Otis Taylor? And I mean, you had to do it in college too. So
well, you know, you had when I look at when I talk about a top line, there was some great receivers. You know, I
Mhm.
mean, guys that could really, really play. So I would hate to bring it down to
Charlie
was he
Taylor,
better
guys like that. There
than.
was great
So,
players.
but
Yeah.
in a composite of works, then you have to look at the overall works of an Otis Taylor or Lance Allworth. And I think they do this sometimes to make it legitimate because you got to have numbers. You know, you got to have numbers, and numbers don't lie. You know, so you know, I look and I'm looking at Noland tonight, and I haven't seen him probably since we played Kansas City, and that was a long time ago. But I never forgot his number, and I never forgot his name. You know, and it came back to me. So he had to do something during that period of time that brought that memory back to me. So, you know, then I go, oh yeah, I remember this, I remember that. To me, that's how you start off, probably picking a guy who going to be inducted into any hierarchy. You know, this person needs to do this or this person did that. And sometimes you need to talk to a person, he did it too. You know, those guys can tell you the quickest. You know, oh man, don't mess with him. You know, he'll
Like
blow by
Zeke
you,
Morris
stuff like
saying he'll
that. Or don't
knock
do
you
this.
out. And he
And
just
so
kept telling me he'll
then you
knock you
start
out.
looking at those guys. No,
No, I
I'm
was
just
just saying,
saying.
yeah, it's just like whenever Zeke Moore would say, he kept telling me that when I had him on the phone that time, he goes, he would say something else about him, and he would knock you out. He just kept repeating that. Like, in other words, don't mess around and you better keep your head on a swivel. And I laughed so much in that interview. I had such a good time with him. He was hilarious, but he was like the man was big, he was fast, and he would knock you out. And so it was just like it was so hilarious. I had a great time with Zeke on the phone.
You know, I think this is where to start. Uh, go to Kansas City, go to Houston, go to those guys. Say, hey man, who do you think? Who do you think? And you get a composite of what they think, and then you start looking at these guys because players not gonna lie. They're not gonna lie to you. They'll say, "Oh, he can't play," or "He did this," or "He did that," and then you start looking at that guy. And so, you know, in case we're talking about the Otis tonight, I don't know if you could go to anybody anywhere that played in the league and they say Otis doesn't deserve to be there. And that's how that would be my first step.
And you know, we had such a big following. I know over the years I've played golf tournaments around the country. And I remember one day we was on the bus going to the golf tournament, golf course at least. And Ken Griffith Sr. was on the bus. And at that particular time, and I know that there was a couple of players that I know played for the Yankees. And you know, during that time, the end of baseball season kind of coincided with the beginning
Yeah.
of football season. And those guys, I mean, I ran into guys that would love when they would come into Kansas City for their baseball games. They would always try and come to see the Chiefs while we was in town. I didn't even know that. And I know he was telling me how much they enjoyed trying to catch some of our games, even though they was in town to play the Royals. So we have a big following, even in other sports, basketball,
Yeah.
baseball. Oh,
Yeah. Let me tell
When
you
you
one
talk
thing.
about that, they said he could have played college. He could have played pro basketball too. He was on the national championship basketball team at Prairie View also.
Who, Nolan?
No, Otis.
Oh yeah, Otis would lead the field during football season when football season's over with, and he gonna start with the basketball team.
Mm-hmm.
I mean, he was just that good. But speaking of Otis, I mean, speaking of Zeke, his name keep coming up. Kansas City and Houston used to sit on the same side of the field. Remember that? Both benches were on the same side.
Really?
Anyway, we played. Buck was getting on somebody, and we were going off the field, and Kansas City was coming on the field. The defense, our defense was going off. Their defense was coming on, and Zeke ran by and stomped his foot. and Buck would take about 4 or 5 steps, and he'd have to. It was hurting him so bad he had to reach down and. But to me that was early day stuff, and we had a lot of fun playing ball. We enjoyed games. The game was different, and we had most of us had played against each other in college. It was just a carryover of what was going on in college.
Can't see you there, Mr. Houston. Pull that camera down a little bit, or pull your phone down just a little bit.
Oh,
there you go. There you go. Yeah,
that's what happens when you get old.
That's all right. We just got the top of your head there for a second, so.
I was ducking for somebody kicking at me.
No, I love stories like that, though. That's awesome. And that's what I was saying. What were some of your favorite moments? That of obviously. It's such a successful team, and that's an awesome story about hearing the Yankees and the guys from King Griffey Sr. I mean, wow, because you guys probably were you the same way. You would like to go watch those guys, and well, I know you guys have always talked about being around Muhammad Ali and stuff like that, and I guess him and Otis were pretty tight, right?
Right.
Kansas City, I can't. We couldn't measure up to Kansas City because they had talent all over the place. They probably would go down as one of the best teams ever assembled. I mean, they were just. I mean, they were a monstrous team to look at. Mm-hmm. I mean, they had Buck Buchanan.
Well, top to bottom, the two of man, they were unbelievable.
They had Willie Lanier. They had Bobby Bell, who was a monster all by himself. And you had to watch them play. That's why everybody can tell you what they did, or they knew the name like I knew the name tonight the minute I heard it. You forget it until it's brought back to you. So it was good. It was good. Yeah. Hey, well, listen, I'm not gonna hold you guys up. I'm an old man now. So
we've been going for a little while anyway, so I appreciate you so much for coming on, Mr. Houston. Again, folks, this is Ken Houston. He is one of the top 100 all-time NFL football players, played safety. I have so much enjoyed getting to speak to you on the occasions that we have, and I appreciate you coming on and again to just kind of share your memories of Otis Taylor, and we'll be talking again. We'll be talking again. But thank you so much.
Let me tell you about that 100 all-time thing. I've never thought that I was going to be anything other than Ken Houston that went to Prairie View. So when I got to when I was inducted to the Hall of Fame, the Rover, what was that at the ship that exploded?
Whoa.
The day I got inducted.
The Challenger. Or
the Challenger. The Challenger, and so exploded. And so when I got to the 100-year all-time team, I was just as out of place as, because I'm thinking, me? That's what I said. They called and told me, me. And it's because it's so many guys. So I will say this to all the guys that didn't make it. I thought you could have. So enjoy yourself. And I'm gone. You guys have a good one. Okay. Take care, Nolan. I gotta get my wife getting off. I'll never get off this thing.
Get on. Yeah. When she says it's time to go. Thank you so much for joining us.
Okay.
All right.
Guys.
All right.
Okay.
Bye-bye.
All right, Ken. Good seeing you.
Oh man, I've enjoyed that. I've enjoyed getting to talk to him. I got to talk to him once before, and actually it was right when we started doing the content creation and stuff and we had a different software. And I tell you, Kerwin and I sat with him for an hour and a half, 2 hours, something like that, and then realized that we never hit the record button. So we called the next day, just like, I don't know what to say here. And he was so gracious and came right back on, said the same stuff again. We had a good time. So we spent 2 days with him. and it was awesome. So it was just one of those things. But I tell you, thank you, Sean. I appreciate that, guys. Thank you so much. This I tell you what, he is a very humble man, isn't he? He always says that all these other guys should be in, but I've never heard anyone say that there was anyone better at safety than Ken Houston. You know,
great, definitely so.
And the video of him, I mean, you talk about when he got an interception, it was like he was shot out of a cannon, gone. You know, he could have played offense, right?
Exactly.
Unbelievable. Yeah.
And you know, and that's the thing about a lot of these players. I mean, they was great athletes. They wasn't just football players. They could play baseball, basketball, because you know, during the all season, we had a basketball team there that we would fly to. If we had to drive over 100 miles, we had a friend that had his own airplane, about a 14 passenger, and he would fly us to Wichita, St. Louis to play games, and we had a heck of a fun. But that's what we did. That was one of the things we did during the off season. And you would be surprised, guys like Otis, Buck Buchanan, even guys like Dave Hill, guys that look. I'm talking about big linemen. Could
even Buddy, Buddy and those guys do the same. I saw a bunch of those pictures of those guys playing basketball and stuff, and I'm like, okay, cool. And I knew about Otis playing basketball because of Prairie View. But I mean, you guys go out and you guys just were athletes. That's all it was. It just go out and it's like I said, you got Jim Kearney goes from quarterback. Yeah, I'll go play safety. It's all right.
Right.
You guys were something else, man. Great athletes. And for you, I mean, being as small as you were, because I was looking through some of your stuff earlier. And you were the smallest guy to ever play at that point. So that's, I mean, that tells you a lot about your athleticism, sir. I mean, they always, you know, I think about when they talk about like Allen Iverson, you know, is he pound for pound, he might be the best basketball player ever. If he was, you know, 6'6", nobody would have been able to stop him. So it's pretty wild. So but I've really enjoyed talking to you guys. And like I said, I didn't really know what we should do with this and stuff. And it's been a hard day I think for everybody, but I love hearing these stories just about you guys. And I'm so glad to have got to meet you. Is there anything else you wanted to kind of talk about before we closed it up here?
Well, you know, I appreciate what you're doing. And we're not going to give up on trying to get Otis into the Hall of Fame. But not only Otis, there's a lot of guys that's missing. And we're gonna keep the campaign going, doing everything we can to get those guys in that's really deserving to be there.
Right. And I would say just to that, thank you for saying that too, because and I would tell you now, I never, you know, I think God puts you in certain situations, whether you wanted to or not. I had no idea that this was coming. And in fact, I found out about it from, you know, Kerwin has been in this with me, but I got asked to do a website and they were like, oh, you were a sports writer? Well, yeah, well, why don't we, you know, you want to try to do this? And so it just turned it into this. And so God puts stuff in front of you, whether you expect it or not. And now I feel like it's my mission is to help get him in. And that's why I have taken it personal. And so is Kerwin. And so is a lot of the folks from Prairie View. And I know a lot of the folks that are in that group, the Facebook group, that, you know, what I would say to everybody is make sure that you go to the actual YouTube page and become a subscriber, because right now we're on my page, on my college football podcast page, because I have a lot of subscribers, or more subscribers anyway. So I wanted to make sure we got this out. And that's one of the reasons we started this show, actually, was to just try to help the Otis Taylor thing. And it's kind of turned into something else. But to me, we need more people to see this information more and more. So I really, really appreciate you coming on. I'm going to put your name in the taglines, and watch, this thing is going to get seen over and over and over again now, because everybody's going to want to see the Super Gnat, you know, it's I remember the Weird Wolf. He was like, hey, aren't you the Super Gnat? In the Facebook group there that day. And he was like, man, that guy was awesome. you know, and I mean, you know, he's a super fan. That guy's a super fan. There's a lot of those folks there in Kansas City. There's a ton of them in Houston too. So guys, if you can, please go in to it's called the Way Past Due channel. It's at Way Past Due. Go on there, subscribe to that channel. There's a ton of other stuff on there. You can check out our apples to apples stats. It'll kind of explain some of it to you. And we're going to be doing some more stuff on that Facebook group. But anybody who wants to know, you know, if you leave comments and stuff, I'll point you all in the right direction. But again, thank you so much. Thank you so much, Mr. Smith, for coming in, and we appreciate you.
Well, I have truly enjoyed it, and I tell you what, I have friends that have gone into YouTube once they found out they got a chance to talk with me and went and, you know, pull up a couple of returns and stuff like that.
Yeah,
it's really a good tool, and I definitely want you to keep working with it, and you have my full support on it.
Thank you so much, sir. I appreciate that a lot. We will definitely stay in touch, and I will talk to you again. And you're getting a lot of everybody, folks. We're gonna go ahead and wrap all this up, but they're all thankful for everybody here. This has been awesome. Thank you guys for all showing up. We appreciate that a lot. This is what it takes, is just to get the word out and kind of build momentum and get the awareness out there. So thank you so much. And everybody's saying thank you, Mr. Smith, just so you can see that. Make sure you like and subscribe, folks, while you're here. If you're not already a subscriber, do that. But the folks that aren't already subscribers to the Otis Taylor page, please go over there and do that. We'll talk about more of that as well. But thank you, Mr. Smith. We will talk to you soon. And God bless you. Thank you.
Thank you so much for having me, and let's do it again.
Yes, sir. Absolutely.
All right. Thank you.
Bye-bye. Wow. Man, these are the most fun. Getting to talk to these old guys that have been just amazing players. And they're so gracious with their time, you know, and just being able to come and talk to you and give you their opinion. Folks, we really do need help getting this guy in, you know. Yeah, we need help getting this guy in. Hey, thanks, Sean. I appreciate that, man. Yeah, it kind of started, and I tell you what, it started. This channel started because of the Otis Taylor channel, and I mean, if you go and look at that channel, it's Way Past Due with dashes between every word. At Way Past Due, there's 80 subscribers, man, and I've put out a ton of content there. Me and Kerwin, who you see there in the right here on the screen, we put out a ton of content. We've done a lot of different stuff, and it just, I mean, we didn't quite get him there this past cycle, but I'll tell you what, I'm not giving it up. So, man, hey, thanks, guys, man. I appreciate that. I didn't know. I wasn't sure how, you know, but you guys are great, man. I've been saying this so many times that our audience on this show is unbelievable. You guys really are. And I really, really appreciate that, that you get behind whatever we're doing. So thank you guys so much on that. And we will, definitely, I'm going to keep this, we're going to keep this on the front of our minds for a while. I would just like to say, again, is like I was talking about when we started, I didn't know who Otis Taylor was. And not just the amazing player that he was, but he was an amazing man. I've learned so much about him. You know, there's a lot of stuff. Yeah, come on back to Bust My Chops. I'm ready. Yeah, we have a YouTube channel. Yes, it's just, if you go to YouTube, in fact, let me just put it in there. Hold on. There it is. Okay. So yeah, this and it'll tell you right there whenever you go to that channel, there's a little, you know, explainer video that pops up. So you guys check that out, hit the subscriber button, share it with people. I think you'll see some things on those videos in there that'll blow you away. So yeah, we'll be doing another live on Tuesday. Tuesday for sure. Definitely we'll have the coach back in here, and we're gonna get back into some college stuff. We probably will talk a little bit about this as well. I am supposed to be on a show for a radio show for Otis Taylor, so I'll let you know for sure what time. Generally, we go at 8:30 Eastern. So, and it may be a little earlier that I go on that one. So I think it shouldn't change anything. But we'll definitely be back over here to see you on Tuesday. Yeah, you're right. You're right, Hank. It honestly, if you look at the numbers, and this is the simplest thing that I can put it, and that one, if you go look at the one it's for the apples to apples, if you see that video, and I'm not saying that he would have done exactly the same, but it's all about opportunity. And the game is so much different. And if you just think about those things, the fact that, I mean, his 1,000-yard seasons for receivers was, unless you were Lance Allworth, they didn't happen very much. He did it twice. You've got guys like, well, Lynn Swann got into the Hall of Fame. He never had 900 yards in a season. Never. Okay. So, it's one of those deals. And he, both of his 1,000-yard seasons, he had a 1,297 and 1,110 or something like that. And both of them were on 57 catches. It's unheard of. It's just unheard of. So just think about that kind of stuff. And this is why we need to be pushing these guys that are in charge of the Hall of Fame that, hey, start judging it on its own merit instead of judging him against guys like Sterling Sharp. They were throwing the crap out of the ball, I mean, Sterling Sharp did in 7 years what it took 11 for Otis to do. So anyway, yeah, it is on par with Randy. I mean, it's literally the only two guys that would have had a better percentage based on, I think it's just Randy and Jerry Rice, and it's by like 0.2, 0.3. We're not talking about huge amounts of difference, man. You stick him think about him in the greatest show on turf. You know what I mean? They had 3,000-yard receivers those years. You think about that. Think about Otis Taylor on the greatest show on turf. The lowest guy on the totem pole that got 1,000 yards had 80 catches. If he'd have ever got 80 catches, he'd have had over 2,000 yards. No doubt. So check it out, guys. I'm going to get out of here, but thank you so much, guys, for coming in. And we'll definitely see you on Tuesday. And may Otis rest in peace, and praying for the family as well. Thank you.